Hello YouTube. Today I want to talk about the best comic book of all time, Tintin, The Adventures of Tintin, written by George Prosper Remy, or everybody knows him as Herge. He is a Belgium, or he was a Belgium cartoonist who was born in 1907 and he passed away in 1983. And he's just fantastic storyteller. Growing up in Belgium, he produced this incredible cartoon character, or I should say comic book character, Tintin, the best well-known detective. And for me, growing up in the 90s, I went to the public library and I found this book, this comic book, and I started to read the stories. And every time they have produced like a new story or a new book, I would go back and I would borrow the comic book for like weeks. I would read it from beginning to end, cover to the back, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really love Tintin growing up in the 90s. I love the stories that he gets into. I love all the characters in the book. You know, you have Tintin, you have Snowy, you have the drunken guy, and then you have the calculus, you have the crazy twins. So I really always just loved the book, the comic book, and I really love all the different stories, and it's a great way for me to escape whatever I'm going through. To, when I'm reading these books, I would fall in love with the stories and the adventures of Tintin, and the drawings and the lessons and the colors and everything about this incredible comic book was really amazing. And I've always thought of Tintin as my favorite comic book. At the same time, me reading Tintin comic books, I was also buying Marvel comics, comic books at the time. I would always go to the convenience store and spend like $1, maybe $2, and get like a brand new comic book from the Marvel Studios, or Marvel Comics as they known back then. I would read the comic book from Marvel, but I would always go back to Tintin. And like I said, I would always just read the books, read the stories, and I really love it. And then later on, when I discovered that they actually made a animated cartoon about the whole Tintin series, I was even more excited. And then when they started to play it on YTV, I believe, and maybe even other TV networks, I just fell in love, because the cartoons were exactly like the comic book. Like the drawing was the same. They had Americanized the dialogue, so they hired like a really nice voice actor to play the voice of Tintin, and all the other voices, for the other characters. And it was amazing. And I've watched that series from beginning to end. And like I said, they drawn exactly like the comic book, And really, I just love that comic book and the animated series when I started to watch it. And I've always just thought of Tintin as one of the greatest comic book that has ever been produced. Especially from a loner like hers. Because I just finished watching another documentary about him. I think the documentary is called Discovering Herge. And that documentary basically just focused on his whole life and how he actually came up with these stories for the different Tintin books. And he grew up in in Belgium, and World War One, and then there's World War Two, and Belgium has always been under the Nazi German control from World War One, and then World War Two even more. And Herge, as a comic book artist, he was afraid in terms of what people might think of him, like when the Germans took over, when the Nazi Germans took over, he could not really he could not write stories that's so political. So he had to find other ideas, other storylines to do a comic book on, and he succeeded. And during World War II, he came up with some really, really incredible stories that has nothing to do with political systems of the world, nothing political, because he was afraid of getting in trouble. And then when the war is over, he went back into the political narrations, different political ideas. He talked a lot about the Cold War that happened in the 50s, and then later on in the 60s. But according to the documentary, the 60s is basically sort of like the beginning of the end for Tintin as a comic book. And in the 60s, there's the rock and roll, the Beatles were becoming more popular, and also Herge was getting a lot more competition, because Marvel Comics were starting to become really, really popular in America, and boys, comic book readers, young boys, they were kind of moving away from maybe Tintin, the type of comic books that Tintin was, and they're moving towards like comic book with like superheroes and stuff like that. So the beginning of Tintin basically started going down, I think, in the 60s. And then the other thing is, like, Herge is basically, according to the documentary, he's a very like a loner. He likes to work by himself. So he wasn't really comfortable with having a lot of people to work for him, but he was forced to do this because, like, Tintin was very, very popular by the 60s. Like, they were selling millions of comic books, and so he needed a lot of help. And one of the coolest things that I learned from this documentary is that Tintin, Herge, is actually, he collaborated with some really amazing artists at the time. And in one of the story in the Tintin comic book, which is Tintin goes to Tibet, and he meets this young Chinese boy named Chang, and Chang is actually the actual name of one of Herge's real friend, and Chang was actually he was actually like an amazing cartoonist who was well known for drawing really authentic, really amazing Asian drawings and calligraphy and stuff like that. And so Herge and Chang, they basically teamed up, and they worked on the I guess the exterior shots of one of the books, the White Lotus, and or maybe I think it's called the Blue Lotus, and Chang basically helped Herge come up with all these different drawings, and he really helped the book. Chang really helped make the comic book look so authentic with the Chinese characters and the drawings and the designs. So Chang really helped Herge be more authentic, and they worked together for a while, and that's why in the story of when Tintin goes to Tibet, the young boy, the young Chinese boy, he has the name of Chang, and that's the way for hurts to just to give an honor and to say thank you to his actual friend Chan.